I'm from Juneau, Alaska, and I thought that one of the great connections between Korea and my upbringing was this fishing industry, and it's having a big part of culture. So I started a lot of my research there, and I think that growing up on boats and working on the water has had a big effect in all of my work, but I wanted to make it feel really specific and particular to this exhibition. So as I was researching, I found a lot of really, really intriguing things. One of the first ones was a particular type of fishing with guanji rods, and that was created in Korea and only exists there, I believe. And so I thought about that for a long time, and then I started digging into the Yellow Sea and finding out about these really unique minerals and this tidal phenomenon that reaches up to 9 meters, and thinking about that sort of distillation process and how that kind of affects and mirrors the way that the paintings are created and also what they are about. So the tidal situation is that you can literally see this division between the fresh water and the salt water. And so it's the minerals kind of create this impression of something that's yellow, and you're seeing this actual powerful line between clear water and mineral-rich water. So the ocean feels like it's literally moving this line back and forth as the tide changes and pulls things in. And that was just exactly how the paintings were being made. I was creating these sketches and then laying the paintings on the ground and poring over these sketches. And what sort of remained became the composition, or further the composition. So I had to think a lot about distillation as my new editing process, and almost as if it was conceptually and physically about the tide. So if the paintings are mirroring that, it's as if it's a jetsam or a flotsam, so that what remains is these minerals, these materials, these marks, these memories. I grind my own pigments, so I have this opportunity to think about the history of pigment and where it connects to places where people had access to pigment, where they did not, where it was, always connected to an area, where it was brought in. And so with Korea, I was thinking, still continuing with this notion of the Yellow Sea. And then as I researched more, I found out about Jeju Island, which is famous for so many amazing things. There's these a matrilineal society of female divers, which are primarily in their golden years. They're 60 plus, and I guess it's been going on since the 1600s, and they free dive inland cotton up until like the 70s. They didn't have wetsuits, and they deep dive and they catch like all the seafood for the island. And it's a really rare thing anywhere to have this matrilineal niche, but they're also just known as the protectors of the sea, and they, sing these great songs and whistle to communicate with one another. So they're really like a proper sea lion woman. It's pretty spectacular and rare, and something that, being one of the few women that I knew fishing, I really enjoyed seeing that from this island. So the more I looked into it, the more I found out that there's this really rich history of mythology, just amazing topography and geography, and just, I still haven't been, but it just sounds like a dream come true. So I kept looking into it, and I found out about these volcanic stones and how I could grind them and use them for the washes, but I could also combine them with beeswax and draw with them. So some of them are traditional waiting stones connected to this myth of, I guess, this dragon king that was waiting for this princess to return, and he sat on the coast and waited until he became, I guess, this very special stone. He sort of like crystallized right into the earth himself as he waited for his love. This is, a lot in that I wanted to honor this beautiful, beautiful space. I mean, it's just a remarkable museum. And I've always had a problem with the way that painting is a bit separated from the viewer. I think that most other art forms are more successful at connecting with their audiences. Like music, you can just listen to something and start to become a part of it, and it becomes familiar, and whether or not you liked it at first, you just start to love it because you know it, it's in your bones. So music is inside of us and outside of us, and it's very ethereal in the way that it kind of latches onto you, and a painting can't do that. So I wanted to at least give it a shot, this sense of playing with objectivity and the viewer being able to be directly addressed throughout the compositions, but then also be able to walk through. So what you can hope and expect to see are these huge 7-meter wide silk veils that kind of blow in the breeze, and that you can pass through and be inside of and outside of. So hopefully you can kind of be more connected with the paintings than ever before. They also play with this concept of timestamps that I'm very interested with the paintings, which is the notion of photography and cinematography connecting to the work. So they're often in a compositions that's more of a 2x3, a horizontal composition, even though they're figurative, which is irregular for figurative works to have a landscape composition. That was all inspired from cinema. And so I wanted to give us the impression of like a film kind of running out, and as if that screen is like paused and stamped. So the film strip itself is being separated through each of these veils, so you can get a full composition, but you're also kind of locking into which section of it you want to connect to. I was deeply inspired by Joseph Alber's color theory, and this idea that every color exists only and relatively in relationship to the colors around it. So I kind of kick off every painting with this sense of color as an activation source like the composition. I want the color to be figured out with and in front of the viewer without a previous sketch or agenda. So I start with these big open washes on this really nice linen with an oil brown and Rabiskin blue, and then this really beautifully primed canvas with a variety of whites. And then on top of that, I start with these big, washy, broad, I guess like waves of color. And the first color that I put down, basically everything kind of ripples from there. That's constantly shifting. You know, what might feel like a very earthy green can switch to a cold, vibrant turquoise, or a sea blue can turn into a violet. And based off of this starting point, all of the other color is in relationship to that. I try often to have something completely across the color wheel, and so that while it's all wet, I can reach, ideally, like 80% of the possible colors, starting from those two different poles. So just the quantities of each amount might push it into a completely different realm. So, you know, you mentioned this sense of kind of an electron pink and these emerald greens. I like the idea of some color feeling very indigenous to a place, very from a place, and then other colors feeling very, I don't know, electric, very unconnected, very, I don't know, like one color is from 1,000 years ago and one color is from 1,000 years in the future. So the one that you mentioned is this sort of a kind of bubblegum, almost a nasty pink. And I think it's an important color because pink used to represent masculinity for the bulk of history until much later it got associated with femininity. And color has this really powerful way of capturing our unconscious associations and things that we shouldn't put gender placements on, and that it's filled with it. Certain colors feel loud, certain colors feel powerful, and how they can sort of be in conversation with others that feel very quiet, very intuitive. And then why we might think something that feels quiet is associated with femininity and powerful is associated with masculinity has to do with all of our unconscious biases that color can play with in a really, really elegant way. I think it's in everything. It's just in our bones. The most obvious conversation is the sense of scale, because I grew up with these really, really remarkably massive spaces. I was only comfortable in those spaces, and I still am, less comfortable in spaces that are populated and inside, and far, far more at ease when I'm outside by myself in nature. I feel complete, and I feel whole, and I feel connected and in awe of those spaces that I grew up in. And I think I'll spend my life trying very hard through paint to give some semblance of that feeling of what it's like to be a part of and in awe of the landscapes around you. The honest answer is that I don't. My parents were art teachers, and so I've been kind of eating and breathing drawing and painting since I was a little kid. And at some point, I think in graduate school, I started to realize that if I was previously sketching something, it was more like all the exciting bits of unwrapping the present happened before I started the piece. And so I wanted to make sure that there was an element of surprise for me and for the viewers. And that just, with the more experience you have, the more you can expect to guess what paint will do. So I have to up the stakes every time and try really hard to work on different ways of operating, like bringing in true abstraction and true surprise to a work. So one of those ways is that the narrative and the figures are not figured out before. They're found within the abstract washes, as if kind of finding a face in a cloud. I can start to pull things forward, and then I'll go back and look at old family photos and things that are really personal to give us a sense of an entangling of bodies. And part of that is because I'm from a large family. I grew up with all of these bodies always together all the time. Felt like in art history I was only seeing bodies in one way, and I felt like the sexualization of female figures in painting was just very tired and very uninteresting. And I think sexuality is a part of almost every painting because it's such a luscious material. However, I wanted to make sure that I could bring figures together in a way that was much more open and much more inclusive of what I think is the actual human experience, and much broader because we have such rich lives that to limit how we interact with one another the way that art history has just feels like we're missing out, and it doesn't really feel like it's actually connected to any of the relationships that I have in my life. I also always really wanted to create a new way of looking at figures, which was something that was, I think is very natural now for the next generation. But when I had started painting, it was kind of unheard of to sort of create these bodies that were androgynous. And I still feel that the way that viewers unpack a painting is based off of their own experiences. And I really want every viewer to feel like their interpretation is 100% correct. And I think that based off of whether or not we assume that a figure is masculine or feminine, it will change the narrative for each viewer. So I try very hard to eliminate an area that was over-articulated. I often need to see strong drawing in a painting, for me to have my kind of like lightning rod to let everything else be more extreme in contrast. But I often take it out in the end so that the piece is opened back up again, that the eye can move more freely throughout it, not get stuck on a place that's hyper articulated. And I think it's quite crucial so that the viewers can feel like their interpretation is extremely valid and a core part of each piece. This has to do with, mostly being extremely lucky. I've had really remarkable friendships and people that interpret the work through a sense of musicality. And there's a few different things. I consider a stage-like quality to the compositions by wanting to break down the fourth wall and have a direct address with the figuration so that the viewers can be making up their mind about the painting as the painting is making up its mind about the viewer. The compositions are usually in these deep, deep exterior landscapes, but the figures are shoved to the front in a way that feels like they must be and can only exist on a stage. So this already lends itself to things like the ballet. But it's also about a sense of movement and what I think of as weather patterns, storms, and knots of wind, and a dryness or intemperateness, humidity in the work, and surface of the water versus looking through that surface and finding something much deeper and richer. All of those things are just the way that I unwrap a painting. But I think a lot of people see it through musicality, through crescendos, through a pacing and a twisting and a tempo and a different sound. And so I think it was a very natural connection with choreographers, and I just really, really hope as more installations happen that the works can serve and assist in collaborations forever. It would be a great joy. The truth is I really self-medicate with music in the studio, and if a painting needs to be like sped up or slowed down or needs more energy or more peace, then I navigate that all with music. But I really can't tell you what, because it's so terrible. It's all like such horrible music that I really gonna have to keep that a secret. However, there's been a couple of things that I've been listening to, some books on tape that I really love, and some good podcasts. I've been re-listening to and rereading Hot, Cold, Heavy, Light, the essays from Peter Sheldall, and he reads them himself in the book on tape, so it's just really a great joy to hear him reading his work out loud. That's pretty beautiful. And then the last thing that I was listening to was this podcast from Helen Molesworth, where it's so good. They brought up these specialists on Vermeer, and this conversation has been going back and forth about reattributing some of his greatest works to his daughter Maria. And it's just a really radical and incredible concept, this idea that who we consider, one of the great masters, that it was actually a lot of the work was created by a teenage daughter, and how the art world would have to completely try to reset our notions of how young women ought to be valued and listened to and nurtured the way that we do for males. It's just an awesome concept, and I can't wait for it to be proven definitively true. So what I hope people take away from this exhibition is my just immense gratitude to SpaceK and everyone that's been involved in this project. It's really a massive compilation of works and a great opportunity that I'm so, so grateful to have the works in conversation with one another. It's really rare with art fairs and exhibitions. I have bodies of works that often, kind of splinter out, and to bring them all together so that people can see a true and deep survey of what's been happening in the last few years is a huge joy, and I'm just so excited. So that's what I hope people take away, is my excitement and my joy. I hope they can feel it. I hope that's really apparent in the work, and I really hope people take time with it and slow down and relax and move through the pieces, and don't get rushed, or sit down and have a glass of wine and relax and just get to know one of the paintings. And that would just mean the world to me, and people just took their time with it. And I just have been looking forward to this for so much time, and to have the opportunity to share the work in such a beautiful space. I'm just very, very grateful.